So hi everyone. So welcome you all to the today's session on SLFRS 13 fair value measurement. So in this session, I will be covering the key aspects of the standards with practical examples, and also towards the end of this presentation, I will be discussing the recent examinations questions tested in relation to SLFRS 13. So moving on to the next slide, here we have included the overview of this standard. The standard defines the fair value as the price that would be received to sell an asset or pay to transfer a liability, so which is also known as exit price in an orderly transaction. So orderly transaction refers, it's not in a stress transaction or in a forced transaction between market participants at the measurement date. So here, if you look at the definition, the standard says it between the market participants. So the fair value measurement will be based on the market participant basis, it's not the entity specific basis. So when we measuring the fair value, so the market participants will use assumptions in order to measure their assets and liabilities. So if you look at the standard is a principle-based standard, and SLFRS 13 establishes how to measure the fair value, and it does not prescribe what should be measured at fair value. For example, what assets or liability that need to be measured is not prescribed in this standard. And also when to measure the fair value, whether you're required to measure at the inception or required to measure subsequently or upon sale or derecognition. So those requirements were not discussed in IFRS or SLFRS 13. And also how to account the subsequent changes in the fair value. So are you going to record it into the P&L, or are you going to record the changes in the OCI? So those requirements also are not discussed in the standard. However, which is partly addressed in SLFRS 13, where day one gain or losses, which needs to be recorded immediately into the P&L as and when it's incurred. So those are the key overview of the standards that you have to remember. So moving on to the next slide. So here we have included the objectives of IFRS 13. So the key objective of this standard is to increase the consistency and the comparability of the fair value which has been recorded in the financial statements. So as I mentioned earlier, fair value is a market-based measurement and it's not an entity-specific measurement. So the market participants will use various assumptions in order to measure the assets and liability. In measuring the fair value, so the entity need to determine the following factors, which as I have mentioned in the slides. So the first requirement is the particular asset or liability that is subject to the measurement. So the measurement needs to be consistent with the unit of account. And secondly, non-financial asset, which is also need to be consistent with the highest and best use. And thirdly, the principal or most advantageous market for the asset and liability. And fourthly, the valuation techniques appropriate for the measurement. So it can be an income-based approach or market-based approach or cost-based approach. So I will be discussing all these four components in detail with the practical examples in the next few slides. So before moving into the detailed discussions, we'll quickly do a knowledge check on what we have discussed so far. An accounting manager of the telecommunication company who just acquired a financial asset wants to know how this asset should be recognized and measured. So which of the following statement is correct? The statement 1, SLFRS 13 is the standard the accounting manager should reference with regards to measuring the fair value of the asset. So this statement is correct. So as I mentioned earlier, SLFRS 13 is a principle-based standard, and it establishes how to measure the fair value, and it will not let you know what assets or liabilities need to be measured and when you are required to measure the fair value. And the second statement, SLFRS 9 financial instrument, is the standard the accounting manager should reference with regards to when to recognize this investment and whether and when the asset should be measured at fair value. So if you look at the key statement again, an accounting manager of telecommunication company who just acquired a financial asset wants to know how these assets should be recognized and measured. So here the telecommunication manager acquired a financial assets. So the financial assets will be scoped under SLFRS 9 standard. So the telecommunication manager needs to refer SLFRS 9 to determine the appropriate recognition and measurement. Therefore, the correct answer is C. The statement 1 and 2 will be the correct answer. Right. So moving on to the next slide. So the first main component, the assets or liability that is subject to fair value measurement. So in order to determine which assets or liability to measure the fair value, we need to identify the unit of account. So the next question is, what is unit of account? So the unit of account is defined as the measurement that used for financial reporting purposes. So it's an accounting concept that determines the level at which an asset or liability is aggregated or disaggregated for the purpose of applying IFRS 13. So when measuring fair value, so the entity need to determine, so whether it's going to determine the fair value on a standalone asset or liability basis, for example, financial instrument or operating asset, or it's going to measure on the group of assets or group of liabilities, for example, cash generating unit or a business. So the standard mentioned, so when measuring the fair value, SLFRS 13 requires an entity to consider the characteristics of the assets or liability. So the standards gives you two characteristics. The first, the condition or location of an asset. And secondly, restriction, if any, on the sale or use of an asset or transfer of the liability. So if you look at the first component or first characteristics, so in order to determine the fair value of the asset is currently exists, so the market price needs to be adjusted to the price that the market participant willing to pay in order to reflect the current condition and location. So this includes the deducting the transportation cost to bring to the market if location is the characteristics of the asset being considered. So if you look at the second characteristic, restriction, so the fair value measurement will be vary whether it's an asset-specific restriction or it's an entity-specific restriction. So if it is an asset-specific restriction, the price used in the fair value measurement reflects the effect of the restriction if this would have been considered by the market participant in the pricing the security. So then, if that's the case, we need to make the adjustment in order to reflect the fair value. So if it is an entity-specific restriction, so the market participant would not have considered those restrictions in the fair valuation. So therefore, if it is an entity-specific restrictions, we are not required to make any adjustments. So we'll do an illustrative examples to understand the theory in detail. The scenario includes an entity owns a pine forest. The pine tree takes approximately 25 years to mature, after which they can be cut down and sold. An average age of the trees in the forest is 14 years. And at the end of the reporting period, the current use of the forest is presumed to be highest and best use. So there is no market for the trees in the current form. However, there is a market for the harvested timber from the trees age 25 years or older. To measure the fair value of the forest, the entity uses an income approach and uses the price of 25-year-old harvested timber in market today as an input. So now we are required to measure the fair value of this forest as at the reporting date. So the entity have use the price at 25 years old in order to determine the fair value. So we need to see, so what are the factors what we need to consider in measuring the fair value. So, so at the current stage, as of the reporting date, there is no market for the trees. So the market participant will require to incur certain costs in order to measure the fair value. For example, so currently we are in year 14. So the price which we measured in the fair value, which is 25 years. So the market participant will expected to incur certain costs for the next 11-year period. So those costs need to be adjusted in order to derive the fair value. So what are the costs that need to be considered? Cost to manage the forest, for example, fertilizing, cost to harvest the trees, cost to transport the harvested logs to the market. So these costs need to be estimated using the market participant assumptions and need to be adjusted in order to derive the fair value. So not only this adjustment, we also need to make an adjustment to the net profit margin. So because we are making adjustment for the cost which expected to incur in the next 11 years period. For example, we are currently at the reporting year, which is 14th year. So the market participants will expected to incur additional costs for the next 11-year period. So the net profit in relation to those costs also need to be adjusted. So we'll work out an example with numbers to understand the theory in detail. Let's assume the selling price of the prime tree is 25 years, would be LKR 40,000, which include a normal profit margin of 25%. So the cost is 75%, which is 30,000. The margin is 25%, which is 10,000. The cost plus margin, which is your selling price, which is 40,000. Accordingly, the cost includes the cost to manage the forest until the trees reach the maturity, and cost to harvest the trees, and cost to transport. So which includes 30,000. So, and also at the end of 14th year, the entity assumes it has incurred 60% of the cost. So based on the previous example, so the price used to determine the fair value is 40,000, which is after 25 years. So, and also here we have mentioned the 60% of the cost the entity have incurred so far for the 14-year period. So in order to identify the fair value, so we need to eliminate the cost that the market participants expected to incur from 14th year to 25th year. So we'll see the cost, the selling price is 40,000. Cost to be incurred in the next 11 years, 40,000 into 75%, which is 30,000, which is already given in the example. And we need to eliminate the cost expected to incur by the market participants in the next 11 years, which is 40%, because we have already incurred as of today 60% of the cost. So that's need to be eliminated for fair valuation purpose. And the thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, we need to make an adjustment for the net profit margin as well, because so the cost, the margin in relation to this 12,000 need to be adjusted. So we have already identified the margin is 10,000 because 40,000 is your selling price. 25% is your selling margin. So 10,000 will be a profit margin if it is for the 40,000 price. And we need to calculate the margin for asset for the next 11-year period, which is 40%, which derives 4,000. So the fair value will be 40,000 minus 12,000 minus 4,000 for the profit margin, and the value will be 24,000. This is the price the market participants will expected to pay for the current condition and location. So hope you will have understand the concept behind the fair valuation. So we'll move into the another examples related to restrictions on asset. So the entity holds an equity instrument for which the sale is legally restricted for a specific period. So the restriction is characteristics of the instrument that would transfer market participants. So as I mentioned earlier, so restrictions can be two types. It can be entity-specific restriction, or it can be a market-specific restrictions. So in this example, it's clear it's an asset-specific restriction. So therefore, when measuring the fair value, the market participant would have considered the restrictions in pricing. So we need to make an adjustment in order to derive the fair value. So the adjustment will vary dependent on various factors. First of all, the nature and the duration of the restrictions. For example, the restriction for the 1 year period or 2 year period. So based on the duration of the restriction, the percentage of discount will be vary. The extent to which the buyers are limited by the restriction. And thirdly, the qualitative and quantitative factors specific to both instrument and the issuer. So these factors will have an impact on the adjustment that we are going to make to the active market price. Right. So we'll move on to the second component. So the second component is identification of the principal market. The standard defines the principal market is the market for the asset or liability that has the greatest volume or level of activity for the asset or liability. So in order to determine the principal market, the standard gives you following guidances. The first guidance is there's a general presumption that the principal market is the one in which the entity would normally enter into a transaction to sell an asset or transfer a liability unless there is evidence to the contrary. So in practice, an entity would first consider the market it can access. So then it would determine which of those market has the greatest volume and liquidity in relation to the particular asset or liability. So the management is not required to perform an exhaustive search in order to identify the principal market. However, it cannot ignore the evidence that is reasonably available when considering which market has the greatest volume or level of activity. And the second guidance is the principal market is considered from the perspective of the reporting entity. So which means the principal market could be different from different entities. For example, let's take a security dealer may exit a financial instrument by selling into the interdealer market. So while a manufacturing company would sell a financial instrument in the retail market. So the entity must be able to access the principal market as at the measurement date. So therefore, it would not be appropriate for a manufacturing company to assume that the interdealer market as the principal market because the company does not have access to those markets. So let's see an example on how we can determine the principal market. An asset is sold in two different active markets at different prices. An entity enters into a transaction in both markets and can access the prices in those markets for assets as at the measurement date. So there are two markets available, market A and market B. So market volume for market A is 6 million. The price that would be received is 26. The transaction cost in the market is 3. Cost to transport the asset to the market is 2. And the net amount that would be received is 21 after deducting the transaction and the transportation cost. On contrast, for the market B, the market volume is identified as 5 million. The price that would be received is 25 and the transaction cost is 1 and the cost to transport is 2 and the net amount will be 22. So we have discussed earlier, so in order to determine as the principal market, the principal markets need to have the greatest volume or level of activity. So in this example, market A has 6 million, which is more than the market B, which consists 5 million. So therefore, market A will be considered as the principal market. So one of the key important things, it would not be appropriate to value the identical assets at the different prices solely because of the management intent to sell the assets in the different markets. For example, in this case, it's not possible to measure the market A fair value and measure the products in accordance with the market A and measure the fair value of the market B and record the assets separately for the market B. That's not possible in the standard. And also using a blended rates based on the management intends to sell in the particular market. So that's also not possible. So the only possible way is to determine the principal market, and the fair value need to be determined based on the principal market. So in this case, the principal market is market A. So the fair value needs to be determined based on the principal market. Right. So we'll do a knowledge check. So tech company works in a technology field and sells 3 types of products, A, B, and C. Tech company has access to several markets. Sales for each product vary from one market to another. Additionally, products that are similar to A, B, and C are marketed by other competitors in areas to which tech company does not have access. So which of the following criteria is used by tech company to determine the principal market for product A? The statement 1, market with the greatest volume sold for product A, so which is correct. So a principal market is determined by the greatest volume. So we can identify the statement 1 is correct. We'll look at the statement 2 and 3 as well. So market with the greatest volume sold for any of the tech products. So determination of the principal market is purely based on particular product and not based on the entity. So statement number 2 is incorrect. So a third statement is market to which the tech company has access to sell its products. So as we discussed earlier, so the entity need to have an access to determine the principal market. So statement 1 and 3 will be considered as the correct answer. Right. So in situation where an entity has more than one market or multiple market, should the determination of the principal market to be based on the entity specific volume or the market based volume and activity? So let's see. So the following are 3 markets exist for entity A's fleet of vehicle. Entity A has the ability to transact in all 3 markets and historically done so. As at the measurement date, the entity has 100 vehicles, same make, model, and mileage, which is identical. That needs to be measured at fair value. So volumes and prices in the respective markets are as follows. So the markets are A, B, and C. The price, these are hypothetical numbers just for the illustrative purposes. The price described as for the market A, the price is 30,000. For the market B, it's considered as 25,000. And for the market C, it is 20,000. So the entity's volume of the transaction in each market, for the market A, which is significant 60%, and for the market B, 25%, and for the market C, which is 15%. And the market total volume of the transaction for the asset by the market, which is for A, 15%, market B, 75%, and market C, 10%. So if you consider the highest percentage from the entity's perspective, so the A will be considered as the principal market. However, the standard says when we evaluating the principal market, we should not consider the entity's perspective, we should consider the market perspective. So the principal market will be considered as market B, which is 75%. So the 100 vehicles will be measured at 25,000. So 2.5 million will be recorded. And the actual sale of the assets in either market A or C will be resulted in a gain or loss. So A will be 30,000, it will be resulted in a gain, and C will be resulted in a loss. So that's how we determine the principal market. Right. So the most advantageous market. So only situation where there is a no principal market, the standard says then we can measure the fair value based on the most advantageous market. So the most advantageous market is the market that maximizes the amount that would be received to sell the asset or minimize the amount that would be paid to transfer the liability after taking into account the transaction cost and the transportation cost. So the market that would yield the highest price after deducting these costs in the most advantageous market. So the most important point I would like to highlight here is, deducting the transaction cost that we used only for the determination of the most advantageous market, and when determining the fair value, we are not considering transaction cost, because the standard says the transaction costs are not the characteristics of the assets or liability. So those are characteristics of the transaction. So therefore, when measuring the fair value, we are not considering the transactions cost into consideration. So we'll move to the next slide. So here we have included a similar example that we have discussed earlier. So in this case, it's a determination of the most advantageous market. So the market A had the price that would be received is 26. The transaction cost in the market is 3. The cost to transport the asset is 2. So the net amount that we received is 21. On the other hand, for the market B, the price that would be received is 25. The transaction cost in the market is 1. The cost to transport the asset to the market is 2, and the net amount will be 22. So when we determining the most advantageous market, we will consider the transaction cost and the transportation cost. So the highest net result will be identified as the most advantageous market. So in this case, the market B will be considered as the most advantageous market because it gives 22% of the net results, which is more than the market A. So once we determine the most advantageous market, the fair value will be calculated based on the most advantageous market. But when we determining the fair value, we should not consider the transaction cost, because as I explained earlier, the transaction costs are not the characteristics of the assets or liability. So those are characteristics of the transaction. So if you look at the fair value of the market B, which is 23.25 minus the transportation cost 2, so which resulted in 23, and for the market A, the fair value will be 26 minus 2, 24. Even though the market A's fair value is higher, so we will be measuring or recording the transaction using market B's fair values, since the market B is identified as the most advantageous market. Right. So moving on to the next slide, here we have included the sections in relation to the market participants. The standard defines the market participants as the buyers and sellers in the principal or the most advantageous market for the assets or liability. So when measuring the fair value, so the entity is required to use the assumption that the market participants would use when pricing the assets or liability. However, SLFRS 13 does not require an entity to identify specific market participant. Instead, the standard requires an entity to identify the characteristics of the market participant that would generally transact for the asset or liability being measured. So here we have included the relevant characteristics of the market participant. First, the knowledgeable. So it means having a reasonable understanding about the asset or liability using all available information. Secondly, independent. So independent of each other. So that is, are not related parties as defined in LKS 24. And thirdly, able to enter transactions. And fourthly, willing to enter transactions. That is, they are motivated but not forced or otherwise compelled to do so. Right. So we'll do quickly do a knowledge check to understand the principles correctly. So the clothing company is a manufacturer of clothing and textiles. Clothing Corp is a part of group of companies working in different industries that are wholly owned by Giant Incorporation. Clothing Corp needs to determine the characteristics of the market participants for specialized equipment used in the manufacturing process in order to determine fair value based on assumptions these participants would consider. Which of the following statements is correct? So let's see the statement A. The Clothing Corp should identify specific market participant and use their assumptions on which to base its own fair value measurements. So as I mentioned earlier, the standard does not require to identify the specific market participants. So the statement A is incorrect. Statement B, Clothing Corp should only use market participants who are willing to buy its products. So when we do the evaluations, we should not make the evaluation on entity specific. So we should consider the market as a whole. So therefore, statement B also incorrect. Statement C, Clothing Corp should consider market participants that would be willing to purchase the specialized machinery. So the willing to participate is one of the characteristics of the market participants. So the statement C is correct. And statement D, Clothing Corp should not consider the market participants who are member of other companies in its group. So this also correct, independent of each other. So therefore, statement C and statement D will be considered as the correct answer. Right. So the next component is the highest and best use. So the highest and best use is the valuation concept that represents how a market participant would use a non-financial asset to maximize its benefits or values. So the fair value measurement of a non-financial asset take into account a market participant's ability to generate the economic benefit by using the asset in its highest and best use, or selling it to another market participant that would use the asset in its highest and best use. So the entity's current use is assumed to be the highest and best use. So this means that an entity not required to engage in exhaustive efforts to identify other potential highest and best use. However, if market information or other factors suggest that a different use by a market participant would maximize the value of the asset, then the information should not be ignored. So finally, the consideration of what is physically possible, legally permissible, and financially feasible would be part of this assessment of what is highest and best use. So what is physically possible? The physical characteristics of the asset that the market participants would take into account when pricing the asset, such as location or the size of the property. Legally permissible, there are any legal restrictions on the use of the asset that market participant would take into account when pricing the asset. For example, zoning regulations applicable to property. And thirdly, the financial feasible, whether the use of an asset is physically possible or legally permissible generates adequate income or cash flows to produce an investment return that the market participant would require from an investment in that asset. So let's do an illustrative examples to understand the concept in detail. An entity acquires a land in a business combination. So the land is currently developed for industrial use as a site for a factory. So the current use of the land is presumed to be highest and best use, unless the market or other factors suggest a different use. Nearby sites have recently been developed for residential use as sites for high-rise apartment buildings. On the basis of that development and recent zoning and other changes to facilitate that development, the entity determines that the land currently used as a site for a factory could be developed as a site for residential use. So now, because the market participants would take into account the potential to develop the site for residential use when the pricing the land. So now we need to determine the highest and best use. So in order to determine the highest and best use, first we need to determine the value for the land for the industrial usage. And also we need to determine the value for the vacant land for the residential usage. So when we valuing the land using the industrial usage, so we need to consider the combination with the other assets and such as the factory or with other assets and liability. So when we valuing the land for the vacant site for the residential use, we need to consider the cost in relation to the demolishing the factory and the cost necessary to convert the land to a vacant site. So the highest and best use of the land would be determined on the basis of the higher of those value. So let's assume the price of the land for the industrial usage is 4 million. And the price of the land, the valuation of the land for the residential site is 5 million. And also the standard, and also the case mentioned for the cost in relation to demolition and to convert the land into a vacant site, which is mentioned as 500,000. So we need to adjust the demolition cost to the valuation of the residential purpose. So 5 million minus 500,000. So 4.5 million will be the value for the vacant land site for the residential uses. So when we compare the valuation with 4 million and 4.5 million, so the 4.5 million will be the highest and it will be considered as the highest and best use, which is the residential usage. So hope you all have understand the concept behind the highest and best use. So then we'll move into the fair value hierarchy. To increase the consistency and comparability, SLFRS 13 establishes a fair value hierarchy based on the inputs to valuation techniques used to measure the fair value. So the inputs are categorized into 3 levels, which is level 1, level 2, and level 3. So the highest priority is given to unadjusted quote price in an active market for identical assets or liabilities, which is level 1. And the lowest priority is given to unobservable inputs, which is level 3. So if you look at the definition of level 1, the quoted price in an active market is identical assets or liabilities that the entity can access at the measurement dates. The example will be a financial asset or financial liability for the identical asset is traded on an active market, for example, Colombo Stock Exchange. For the definition of the level 2, inputs other than quoted prices included within the level 1 that are observable for the assets or liability either directly or indirectly. So the example will be interest rate and yield curve observable at commonly quoted intervals, implied volatilities, and credit spread. So the level 3 definition will be all observable inputs for the assets or liability. And the example will be projected cash flows in a discounted cash flow calculation. So let's move into the valuation techniques. So there are 3 valuation techniques available: the market approach, income approach, and the cost approach. So the market approach is the widely used approaches, and it uses the price and other relevant information generated by the market transaction involving identical or similar assets or liabilities. So when it comes to income approach, it converts the future cash flows or income and expenses to a single current amount. The fair value measurement using the income approach will reflect the current market expectation about the future amounts. So the approach includes the valuation techniques such as the present value techniques and the option pricing models, for example, the Black-Scholes and the binomial model. So the cost approach, the third approach, reflects the amount that would be required to replace the service capacity of an asset, which is also known as current replacement cost, and which is mainly used on the tangible assets, such as on the valuation of the tangible assets, such as the property, plant, and equipment. So we'll do a quick knowledge check on our understanding with the fair value hierarchy. Here we have given 3 inputs, and we need to identify whether it's a level 1 input, a level 2 input, or level 3 inputs. So if you look at the first input, to determine the fair value of the licensing agreement, an acquiring company in a business combination uses the royalty rate recently negotiated in a contract agreed between the acquired company and unrelated party at the inception of the license agreement. So this is considered to be a level 2 input, because the royalty agreements it's considered as a level 2 observable input, and it's not considered as a level 1 input because it's not quoted in an active market. If you look at the statement 2, input 2, to determine the fair value of the cash flows for a strategic business unit, an entity uses its internally developed expectation to determine the future cash flow in the absence of any observable input from the market. So the level 3 inputs definitions mention if there is any unobservable inputs in the market, so then it will be considered as level 3. So here the input itself mentioned absence of any observable input, so therefore it will be considered as level 3 input. And the third input is a company uses the quoted market prices at the measurement date to determine the fair value of an investment. So this will be considered as level 1 input because it's quoted in an active market. Right. So let's see the past paper questions which has been tested in March 21 in the advanced business reporting paper. The first question is the Green PLC acquired an entity A and it's required to measure the fair value of the following items by applying the requirements of SLFRS 13 fair value measurement. The first scenario is related to asset held as an inventory. This asset is traded in 2 different markets, the US and the UK markets. Entity A can access prices in both markets. Green PLC thinks the UK market price is more appropriate to measure fair value since entity A buys and sells this asset in the UK market. The following details are the acquisition data provided to you. So the US market, the price per unit is 2,300. Market volume for the assets is 6 million. Transaction cost per unit is 100. Transportation cost is 230. For the UK market, price per unit is 2,400. Market volume for the asset is 4 million. Transaction cost is identified as 120, and transportation cost per unit is 170. So the question requires to calculate the fair value. So we have discussed earlier, so in order to determine the principal market, so the market with the highest volume will be identified as the principal market. So in this case, US market will be considered as the principal market. So even though the most advantageous market is the UK market, so how we determine the most advantageous markets after deducting the transaction cost and transportation cost, US market gives the net amount of 1,970, whereas UK market gives you the net results of 2,110. So the highest net results will be given from UK market. So therefore, UK market will be considered as the most advantageous market. So since the US market is considered as the principal market with the highest volume of transaction, so the fair value need to be determined based on the US market. So how do we calculate the fair value? So as I mentioned earlier, when we determining the fair value, we should not consider the transaction cost because transaction costs are not the characteristics of the asset, so liability. So those are characteristics of the transaction. So 2,300 minus transportation cost at 230, so which gives you the fair value of 2,070. So even though the US market fair values are lesser than UK market, since it's a principal market, we need to recognize the assets based on the price determined by the principal market. So that's the answer for the first scenario. So scenario 2, so investment in an equity instrument. Entity A holds an investment in an equity instrument which is pledged as a collateral to support a debt obligation of the entity. Until the debt is fully settled, the entity cannot sell the instrument. The debt is due for repayment 1 year after the date of the acquisition of the entity A by Green PLC. It is highly likely that the entity will settle the debt on the due date. The following details at the acquisition date are provided to you. So the market price of the equity instrument is 13 million. And the discount percentage on the market price for the restriction period for the 1 year is 7%. So we have discussed earlier, need to determine the characteristics of the assets or liability. So we have discussed the characteristics such as the conditions and location of the asset, and also restrictions, if any, on the sale or use of an asset or transfer liability. So the fair value measurement will be differ if the restriction is then entity specific, or if the restriction is asset specific. So in this scenario, so the restriction on the sale of the asset, since the entity has pledged that the asset as a collateral for a borrowing. So the restriction is the characteristics of the entity rather asset. So therefore, since it's an entity-specific restrictions, we are not required to make any adjustment, because the market participants, when measuring, they would not consider these restrictions into the consideration. So therefore, the fair value will be 13 million. Right. So to move on to the third scenario, entity A has purchased equity shares offered by BPLC in a private placement. According to the regulatory requirements, these shares are locked in for selling for 1 year from the date of allotment. On the date Green PLC acquired entity A, the remaining locked-in period was 7 months. The following details at the acquisition dates are provided to you. So the market price per share is 23. So the discount percentage on the market price for the 1 year locked-in period is 10%. And the discount percentage on the market price for the remaining lock-in period is 7 months is 8%. So this is similar to the previous questions that we have discussed. So the previous question is entity-specific restrictions. So, but this is asset-specific restrictions. So we are required to make an adjustment. So the next question is, are we required to make an adjustment for the whole 1 year period, or we are required to make 10%, or are we required to make an adjustment for the next 7 month period, 8%? So the question requires to calculate the fair value of the Green PLC at the point of acquiring the entity. So at the point of acquisitions, there is only 7 months remaining for the restriction. So therefore, we can use 8%, which is relevant for the 7 month period. So the discounted price will be 21.16. So the 23% is the market price. So which need to be adjusted for the 8% of the discount rate. So the price will be, fair value will be 21.16. So that's the end of the session, and thank you so much, everyone, and all the very best for your upcoming examination.